Hello and welcome to Your HR Career. This time on my podcast, I'm in the realm of Friends of HR, and I'm very, very delighted to have Hannah Strawbridge from Han Law to speak to us today. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Now, your background is an employment lawyer, for those who don't know, Hannah. And in this section of the podcast, I'm really interested to talk to people who work alongside HR people and are kind of in our world, but not exactly like us. But so therefore, friends of HR, which you most definitely are. So let's get stuck in. So as with all the guests, I sent you a list of questions to prep and have a think about before the session. And I'm going to pull out some of the ones that you went for. I love your answers, Hannah, because you were brave and you gave me some delicious, embarrassing moments and things you wish you hadn't done. Some people shy away from that, so I'm embracing it. So I say, good, well done, and thank you. So let's get stuck in. So let's start with, I'm always interested to know where careers begin. So talk to us about why law and then also why employment law.
Right. So I've wanted to be a lawyer from when I was about 13. I was kind of one of those nerds that just knew what I wanted to do. And I don't honestly know why, because I was brought up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. No one in my family had been to university, let alone become a lawyer. I guess I was academic, and probably someone along the lines of, you could be a lawyer, maybe, or maybe it was Ally McBeal, I don't know, in the 90s. But yeah, it was just something I kind of always wanted to do. It really suited kind of my skill set, I felt. And I've always enjoyed it, to be honest. It's never kind of disappointed me in terms of just how interesting it is and how challenging it is, and how every day is different. And it's for someone like me who gets bored quite easily, I think it's just been the best career, to be honest. And obviously within law there are so many different areas, and they vary so much in terms of, again, some of the skills you need. I think that the funny thing was, when I was doing the LPC, which is what you have to do when you've done a law degree to qualify as a solicitor, I didn't really rock up to many of the tutorials on employment law because I didn't really like it. I found it really boring. So I didn't really bother going to many of them. I passed it fine, but I wasn't interested. And then when I got my training contract for a firm in Bristol, you have to do like 4 different departments within the 2 years, or you did back then. This was a long time ago. And one of them was employment, and I just loved it straight away. And that was me. They offered me a job in a different department when I qualified because I wasn't facing employment for anyone else, but I turned that down and stuck to employment. So I think it just goes to show, frankly, how kind of, I don't know if it's the same now, but what you were taught at university and even on the practice courses, to become a solicitor, how different it really is to working in a firm in real life, dealing with clients, working within a team.
So what was it about employment law? Because I'm always fascinated. I'm not sure if you agree, but the kind of people, somebody who is going to be a family lawyer or a corporate lawyer or an employment lawyer, you can pick them out of a lineup. I certainly think I could, in terms of what their style is and what their skills are. Would you agree with that?
I try not to offend any corporate lawyers. I'd say, to be honest, some family lawyers are a bit more kind of aligned with employment law because it's just so dealing with people. I mean, all law is, isn't it? Obviously, you've got to deal with your clients, but with what we do, and particularly historically, I mean, now we just act for employers, but in the past, I've acted for individuals and employers, and that just needs a whole load of skills. And when we've got involved in litigation, basically, it all involves people's relationships breaking down. It's much more people-centric, isn't it, than sort of a corporate transactional deal. I don't think it's far off family. So the areas that I were interested in, was anything to do with the childcare. I was interested in family law. I was interested in criminal. I was interested in and employment. And I think they're all kind of areas which are very much around people's psychologies, how people behave, relationships, as opposed to maybe stuff like conveyancing, or something where it's a bit more transactional. I think for me that was a big one. And I think with employment, it was just such an area to get stuck into because there's so much to it in terms of the various claims, as you know, and the various areas of employment law. And then obviously acting for individuals and employers, it's like that's like two different jobs as well. And then within employment as well, you've got the advocacy side of it, you've got the litigation, and then you've got, the other stuff in the office. So there's just so many aspects to it in terms of the technical stuff, but then also in terms of sort of the skills that you need. And so it's really good. There can be, people that I work with who would hate to go and present a case to a judge and wouldn't do that within employment law, but would be fantastic at, drafting sort of the right contractual documents or negotiating an exit. And other people like me always sort of love that sort of buzz of, the tribunal side. And what's interesting with employment law is that you don't have to have specific rights of audience as a barrister to present a case or defend a case in tribunal. So a big part of my career was tribunal based, and that wasn't just preparing the cases, that was literally going and defending some really meaty cases. I loved it. It was stressful, obviously. You need to think on your feet, but what it's really done, I think, is it really helps if you've done that a lot, then I think you're in a better position to advise clients as to, how a judge would see a case, what a tribunal is like in reality, because frankly, there is, a lot of solicitors just don't like doing that. So, it's nice that we can sort of say that this is what I think a judge would say, and in reality, this is what it's going to be like for you.
It's kind of looking behind the scenes, isn't it? Giving them the idea of what's likely to happen, I think, is always really reassuring, isn't it? And so tell me, in this series, we've been exploring with some of the HR people about what skills you have within you that match to the role, because of course that's when we're going to do our best, but also when we're going to feel most comfortable. So you said early on in that, in sort of your thinking there, that once you'd seen employment law, you knew it's for you and you thought it was a good match. So tell me kind of three things you think are sort of key skills or qualities that you have that are a good match for employment law, just if there's other people thinking about if that might be right for them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I think this is changing a lot within our industry. So, historically, to be a good technical lawyer, particularly in employment, you need to be an eye for detail. You need to be a problem solver, think quite laterally and creatively as well, particularly if you're arguing cases. But the skills, again, really vary depending on which bits of employment law you enjoy doing the best. And I think, although back when I started, it was very much like the priority was being a good technical lawyer. And now, things are so much more competitive and things are so different in terms of how we interact with our clients, that being a good technical lawyer is kind of given, but what really I think sets people apart and helps lawyers to win business, which is, what we have to do, is the other stuff. It is more the softer skills and the people skills. And I guess, that's quite a hard adaptation or a concept that still for some lawyers, particularly people like me who've been in the game a long time, because it was just none of this was taught at university, neither the business side of it or the actual, how do you get on with clients? How do you, show empathy to your clients who might have been sexually harassed at work for the last 2 years? Or how do you, show that you have business acumen when you're talking to an MD and they're going through a large redundancy process? Just being a technical lawyer in that instance is not going to help you build that relationship with a client. And we all know that's like the number one thing when you have clients in business, no matter what areas of work you're in. So now it's far more about, I think, the sort of human side to it, which is a relief, frankly, because law has always been left behind with that, while HR and other industries in particular have been kind of, embracing that. It's taken the law a lot longer to realise like we can do social media posts about, what we do outside of work. Actually, that helps us ferment those relationships better. Like our clients don't want us to rock up in a 3-piece suit, patronise them, and be all hoity-toity. That might have once worked, almost scaring your own client, but it's just frankly not how people want to do business now. So, relying on just that technical side is really not enough. And to be honest, in terms of bringing people into my business and particularly junior people, I think in reality, we can learn the technical stuff. I mean, it's complex, but, we can learn that and we can learn those skills. But I'd really be looking for, the more rounded person in terms of, just being inquisitive about who they're talking to, being able to get on with people, being able to sort of sympathize with the people they talk to, know how to build relationships, because not only is that going to help you sell what you do, but it's going to help you just really have a strong relationship with your client. Because when you get to the point with a client where you need to tell them some bad news, or you need to say, look, this is how much this is going to cost you. Is it really worth it? You need to think really hard about this. And they might be really wanting to crack on. If you built that relationship with them, they're more likely to trust what you say. They're more likely to, do the right thing and go along with your advice.
Because it can be some hard truths, can't it? Often when people are in litigation with their employer, they have a fixed view of how they think it should be, or how things have panned out. And sometimes you sort of busting that, aren't you, and trying to get them to a point of perhaps reality, or letting go some of it, and that can be a very challenging conversation. I'm guessing it gets easier with experience. Would that be right?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me it helps that frankly I'm a very honest, straight talking person anyway. You kind of, and and definitely that's grown with confidence as I've got older. Just having the confidence to think, it's okay to be honest to people, and that's being a good lawyer. Telling them what they don't want to hear. It's far worse to kind of smooth things over, and not giving them the right advice. And it's just having the confidence really behind what you say.
Yeah. And I think when thinking about careers as well, we can think about how our knowledge and experience and confidence grows as we have more years in that role. And I think a lot of it as well is knowing ourselves, isn't it? We've talked already about you having an understanding that you had these skills that were a good match for law, even though you were on the farm and nobody else around you was in that direction, but you just had a sense of that. You knew yourself. And I wonder whether I'm thinking as well about how we can end up in the wrong job, the wrong culture, the wrong business, perhaps if we're misaligned or we're not clear. So tell me a little bit. You kindly shared an experience when you'd taken the wrong job. So tell us a little bit about that kind of, how did that happen, and kind of what did you learn from that in terms of how it feels when you're in the wrong culture?
Sure. I mean, to be brutally honest, I've heard a lot of people say in law, there's been quite a lot of bad press recently about law as a career. And what I'd say is you need to distinguish the actual job in terms of helping people every day, meeting really nice clients, working with some lovely colleagues, doing something really interesting, stimulating, challenging, using different skills, building those relationships with the industry, which frankly, I know a lot of people, including myself, where, the reason why they've left the law or they've gone and done something else, I wouldn't say it's ever because they hate the job, or they're sick of clients. It's been more around some of the restrictions or some of the problems with the industry historically, which is basically because it's an old, it's a professional service. There's some aspects of it that's Victoriana really. That is changing now, but I do think there's, particularly in some of the big law where there's like very long working hours or presenteeism, or some of them are forcing their employees back into the office 5 days a week now. All of that is, there are I think younger people coming through that are thinking either leave the law or let's look at sort of different career options within it. So I think that needs to be distinguished, because there was never a day where I disliked the job, but there's been lots of days where I was like, I don't understand why this part of the firm works in this way. It's not maximizing profitability, or it's not helping the client, or why I've hit all my billing targets, why do I still have to sit here at 6 o'clock? Or
corporate madness, that general kind of crazy stuff that happens because it's always been done that way.
Exactly, yeah.
Is that kind of
I
approach?
think that's been some of the battles with it. I'm not the person saying that's one of the key reasons why I set up my own firm.
Yeah. So you're able to create then a culture that suits you, and I'm guessing as well suits many other people who are seeking you out as a more modern way of working,
Yeah, I mean, to me, one of the big things was just not having the flexibility with a young family, even though I was smashing my job. And I just, I don't know, you spend a long time in those roles, and I couldn't really get that. I was working on my own anyway, so I could have easily have done some of that job from home, and it was just too difficult trying to do both as a single parent. So I just thought, this is worth a go. Let's see what happens. And at least if I work for myself and I'm self-employed, then I've got that flexibility. And it's just grown from there, really. And then obviously, I think that when I set up 5 years ago, consultancy sort of models like ours, remote working, were quite rare. Now, there's more and more. So it just shows that there is kind of a tide of change there. And it does tend to be, not always, but, older people or people with families, that have just become sort of tired of trying to do that juggle and feeling like they're failing in both.
Yeah. And it gives them an alternative. And I think that's one of the, I so hesitate to say the upside of COVID because there really is so little, but I do think it kind of challenged, it really put the world of business under stress, didn't it? And I think some of that catalyst has created new ways of working.
It has a bit, although now in law we're seeing firms going the other way again.
Yeah, locking it back down, everybody in the office.
People won't come into the office. Or the latest one is one of the larger firms has put a ban on AI, ChatGPT in the office. Now, to me, that is just madness. It's out there to say, it's more about how can we use this responsibly, because obviously the problem is when in law firms, when you're regulated by the SRA, there's a lot of fear. And I don't think that's the fault of many of the law firms, but when you've got the regulator who does generate quite a lot of fear in terms of how we have to work, there's no room forever, young lawyers are getting struck off for various things.
It puts fear in, doesn't it?
Yeah, so obviously things like ChatGPT will instill that concern around that side of things, but it's just not reality. Everyone's using it or should be using it, and it doesn't mean we're just gonna start then that it's going to replace us and the advice we give to a client, but it can be really helpful in terms of efficiency.
Law firms, as you said before, they are very traditional and quite conservative environments. I remember in my early career, we weren't allowed any remote working because there was the fear of the risk of the data being shared or being breached. I then went to move to a bank, and you were given a fob and a laptop and you could work anywhere. And it was just the mindset of the different cultures. And I think law, I think traditionally, as you said, is somewhat on the back foot sometimes, takes longer to get there than perhaps others. So talk to me a little bit about HR, if you would. So you've obviously worked alongside and with HR people. I'm guessing some of your commissioners are HR people, some of your clients now. So one of the questions I asked you, and I asked everybody in a different way, is tell me what you think makes a great HR person in your experience.
Yeah, similarly to employment law, really, in my experience, there are so many avenues to HR, as well, in terms of, the various areas within it. And, I've worked in-house and previously, which was just great for me because it was just like me as the only lawyer in a massive HR team, which was made up of various people from HR business partners to advisors to learning and development professionals, the whole kind of room of different roles. And I guess a big part of it is leadership. I still I have a concern that still within quite a few businesses, it's not given the HR as an area, isn't given the kudos, and it's not, it's not always kind of given that seriousness that it should be, as such an integral part to the business. I've worked with some contacts where, there's no HR director on the board, and, therefore, no matter how, even though that their role is so important, because frankly, the most important part of any business is the people, that's just giving a vibe that's not prioritized, because they're not kind of, on the board and able to make those strategic decisions alongside the business. I mean, I hope that things like that are changing. I do think leadership's really important for HR, but I also think HR professionals need to be quite robust in terms of ensuring that their sort of representation of the people within that business are heard. Because I from my experience, there's still quite a lot of battling around that.
Definitely, yes. So sort of advocating for the staff, yeah. Absolutely. And I think there's often, isn't there, as you say, there is a bit of a crossover often between kind of the skills that make a good employment lawyer and the skills that make a good HR person. And it's been interesting, the people that I've been interviewing, quite a few people in HR started off in law or thought about law or applied to do law. There is a sort of a friendly
definitely. I've seen that. I've not seen it much the other way around though. I think there's a reason for that.
I'm trying to think whether I have actually. No, I do know somebody who qualified as an employment lawyer and then went into a generalist, a little bit like you actually. They were in-house within a larger team and decided to stay and became HRD.
Right, okay.
Actually, I can think of two that I know, but yeah, they're not super common. Yeah. Absolutely, but there is a similarity, isn't there, and a crossover. Yeah, fantastic. Right, brilliant. Well, we've got time for one last question. So tell us then, Hannah, where you are now and what's next for you. You've alluded to your business, so tell us a little bit more about that and kind of what your future plans are. That would be great to hear.
Yeah, so we're 5 years in, and there's just so many roller coasters with sort of setting up a business like this from scratch. And so we are growing year on year and want to continue doing that in terms of, working with new clients and building on the clients that we've got. We want to sort of carry on increasing sort of some of the services we do. So although we focus on the employment law side, so tribunals, advice, the legal side of things, there are, like you said, we've got a couple of really niche sort of HR professionals within our team. We'll never try and just go and do HR advice. And to be honest, I'd rather us work and collaborate with, other HR consultants or HR businesses on that, because, you've got to know where your lane is and the value you add in terms of costs and stuff. So we're not going to go down that route, but we do have one of the ladies who is also a tribunal specialist. She's a qualified mediator. And then we've got some services around menopause training and coaching as well, because that was on the back of us doing a big survey where we interviewed 3,000 women who are going through the menopause at work. And so we got some amazing data response to that, which is basically sort of going through where employers are failing still and what needs to be done from the point of view of these women. So on the back of that, we have sort of specialised in this area around menopause as well. So I think the good thing is with us, we can kind of cover off some of it, but we do still like to work closely with, HR professionals sort of separately to us, but collaborate. I think that's a big word for us this year. We also collaborate with another firm in terms of the commercial law stuff that they can offer. We could do that, but again, I just think there's some strength in being a specialist firm and collaborating with other boutiques, to offer kind of what some of the large firms can offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's plenty, aren't there? Like you say, I like this idea of staying in your lane and doing what you specialise in. I think there's quite a few businesses who've started where you are and have gone broad, and it just is too much to handle. So I think there's real power in it. And you said you you're supporting employers primarily rather than employees. So
Yeah, we
if
are.
people are,
Again, we've partnered with another firm that sort of supports employees. But yeah, our focus is on the employer side. And I think that's just naturally where we're up to, really, in terms of the team and our specialities and the kind of, you know, our litigation sort of background as well, and our, you know, defending tribunals is kind of our thing, really, is where we call ourselves experts, you know.
Fantastic. So just so if people are interested in employment law support, they know, you know, to what kind of support you'll be able to give them, and I'll include your links in the episode.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, we're out of time, so thank you so much for your time, Hannah, and thank you everybody for listening. So you are listening to Your HR Career Podcast. The episodes are all hosted on my Substack page, so you can find that directly through Substack, and do please join the newsletter if you want early access, or through my LinkedIn page. Thanks again, Hannah, for your time.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's been great.
Perfect. And thanks everyone for listening. See you later.
Bye.